It seems like the left is pulling out all the stops in a desperate bid to prevent Elon Musk from acquiring Twitter. There's some speculation about sabotage of the company. Twitter, of course, locked down their code. I'd say that's your more leftist, woke personality. But let's talk about your more centrist, moderate establishment liberal institutions, like the Open Markets, sorry. Watch Your Guru tweets, just in. The FCC, FTC, and DOJ were asked to block Elon Musk's deal to acquire Twitter after claiming the transaction poses a direct threat to American democracy and free speech. The commissioner responded and said they had no authority to block the purchase. Wow. So this is where they're going now. They can't win. They will try every possible front to stop this from happening. Elon hasn't done anything, but they know it's coming. We've already seen many of these leftists say they're going to allow right-wingers to say mean things. Yeah, because in the real world, you can. And that's called free speech. My favorite thing about this whole argument is when the left thinks they're owning the right because like Elon Musk blocked someone. It's like, dude, we who believe in free speech have been advocating for you to block people this whole time. So they're like, Elon Musk says he's for free speech, but he blocked me. Yes, you should do the same to people you don't like. It's called free speech. You don't got to listen. They get to say. Fox Business reports FCC commissioner shoots down, quote, absurd claim the federal government can block Musk's Twitter purchase. The Open Markets Institute claimed that Musk should not be allowed to own both Twitter and Starlink. Why not? Look, it's funny to me that you got Bill Gates, you got Jack Dorsey, you got Mark Zuckerberg, and they got their pinkies in every pie. And where's the news cycle on that? Where's the complaints? Well, obviously, those of us who believe in free speech have been clamoring about it quite a bit. And now all of a sudden, Elon Musk, who's ideologically poised to be in the other direction, free speech, now it's a problem. To be fair to the Open Markets Institute, they've long complained about big tech and wanted to break them up. Now, I can respect that. I don't completely disagree. But it's just fascinating that finally there's some pushback, a push for free speech, and now they're like, oh, everyone should get involved. All right. Brendan Carr, a commissioner on the Federal Communications Commission, rejected a left-leaning organization's claim that the FCC has the authority to block Tesla CEO Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. After accepting Musk's $44 billion offer Monday, the Open Markets Institute warned that the deal represents a threat to American democracy and free speech, suggested the deal is illegal, and argued that the federal government has the power to block it. Quote, the Open Markets Institute believes the deal poses a number of immediate and direct threats to American democracy and free speech. Spare me. That is just not true. OMI Director Barry Lynn said in a statement, Open Markets also believes the deal violates existing law, that the Federal Communications Commission, the Department of Justice, and the Federal Trade Commission have ample authority to block it. Lynn noted, the deal would give to a single man, one who already wields immense political and economic power, direct control over one of the most important platforms for public communication and debate, which was previously in the hands of what, Vijaya Gadde or Jack Dorsey, the Twitter board? But it's more than one person. It was ideologically homogenous. Spare me. Citing Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, the Telegraph Acts of 1860 and 1866, the Mann-Elkins Act of 1910, and the Communications Act of 1934, the OMI director claimed that the American people have an absolute right to ensure the full openness and neutrality of all essential public infrastructure. He also noted that the U.S. government has used antitrust law in the communications sphere. All right. Let's hold our horses a bit. My good friends, are you suggesting that Twitter is public infrastructure and that it should be regulated as such? Deal. Outright deal. You know what that means? It means absolute free speech and ain't nobody going to be able to complain to. What's the matter, left? You don't want to be on a platform where people have free speech? Too bad. You know, they like to go out in the streets and smash up windows, which ain't free speech, and they wear masks while doing it. You want to come and vandalize and go insane and all that? Nah, that's illegal. You want to come to the public square and have a debate? You're going to have to do it on legal terms. And that means there's going to be people there you don't like. So by all means, if you want to call this public infrastructure, deal. Does that mean I'm saying we should nationalize the platform? Not entirely. Somewhat. I'm not a fan of the government. I think they get so much wrong. But there are certain things I think are okay, like regulations that restrict. I don't like it when the government gains more power. And arguably, if the government can restrict a major corporation, they're gaining more power. So there's a challenge here. But I think about it this way. If Twitter has some regulation, like you can't ban political speech, or if it's legal speech, it's allowed, I'm fine with that. If these what you do then is, if these advertisers don't want to be on it, there's two solutions. One is, well, if there's a regulation, Twitter can be like advertisers. We're not allowed to dictate what people are allowed to say because the platform's so massive. If you don't want to be in the public town square, then by all means, don't be. And you will not be relevant to the conversation. These companies need to be here. Brand safe. Get out of here with that stuff. There is another alternative. If the platform really is that important, then semi-nationalize it. Sure, it can be retained by private ownership, and then we subsidize it. Now, there's challenges I find with subsidy. I'm not a big fan, but these are potential options, and we'd have to navigate through them. If Twitter really is important to political speech, breaking news, and public discourse, then we should not allow it to be controlled by people who are desperate to just get ad dollars, because ad dollars will make the platform go in insane directions, as it already has. Perhaps the solution is, as Elon Musk sees it, memberships, meaning people who want to be involved and get privy access will pay a monthly fee. I would. Think about it. How many followers does the New York Times have? 53 million. Now, some people have pointed out that they don't get any engagement. I don't think that's as nefarious as many people believe. I follow these big news outlets. I don't know exactly which ones, but like Reuters and CNN. I don't interact with them. I see the tweet in my feed and I go, whoa, breaking news. I open the article. I'll look into it, try and fact check it, and then I'll tweet about it. I don't click the profile or retweet it. I'm just getting that news. I want the news. I am what's described as a power user. I think that's what they call it. But I'm a prolific user of Twitter. And I don't engage with major news outlets. I engage with debate from the opinions of people, but news outlets typically are just, if a news outlet posts something dumb, that's opinionated or just wrong, I'll interact with it. But typically I don't. That's what I want. Now, getting that feed is actually really important because it allows me to curate the sources that I think are important. And I try to have a mix of, mainstream and conservative outlets, mainstream, of course, being left. So maintaining that platform, I think, is a good thing. How do we do it? It's tough. But the New York Times would absolutely, in my opinion, they'd pay $1,000 a month for that feed. Hands down. Elon Musk could create multiple tiers of service level and say, the New York Times, this is a platform for you to advertise news stories you want to go out to people and to create a conversation. How much is that worth? What's it worth to you? Quote, Musk already controls one of the most important internet platforms in the world in the form of satellite communication system Starlink, Lin noted. Since the late 19th century, the U.S. government has routinely acted to prevent mergers between existing essential platforms. This means that just as we would now expect the U.S. government to block a takeover of Twitter by Google, Facebook, Comcast, or Verizon, the same rules apply to owners of Starlink. Except I still haven't gotten my Starlink. So don't act like Starlink is functioning. Starlink is a low latency, low orbit satellite internet platform, and it's not even active everywhere. It is not the dominant ISP. And what I'm hearing is that as much as they purported to offer up to 100 megabits per second, once people actually get it and they're in a congested area, it drops down to like 10. So not even that good. I mean, it's pretty good. Low latency satellite means amazing things for people who live out in the middle of nowhere. It means really great things for people who have RVs. We can drive up in the mountains and play video games with that low latency internet. But to act like this is a dominant platform, come on, this is ridiculous. It is clear they are just desperate, crying, please, no, Elon Musk can't have Twitter. Here we go, Brendan Carr. A Trump-appointed FCC commissioner shot down Lin's claims as absurd. The FCC has no authority to block Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter, and to suggest otherwise is absurd, Carr said in a statement Wednesday. I would welcome the full FCC making it clear that we will not entertain these types of frivolous arguments. I'd say bravo as I clap, but the reality is the dude's just like, bro, I can't do anything about this. It's not about him standing up for what's right. It's about him being like, I can't do it even if I wanted to. It does not surprise me to see that some interest groups are planning on throwing the kitchen sink at this transaction in an effort to derail it, Carr added in a statement to Fox Business. All right, well, there you go. Of course, the FCC has no authority to block the transaction. And while I am not in a position to speak for the DOJ or the FTC, the other agencies that were identified in that Open Markets Institute release, I am not aware of any basis upon which any federal agency can block it. But I defer to those agencies to speak to the scope of their authorities. Suffice it to say, it is far from clear that the groups objecting to the transaction are going to do so because they're interested in the neutral application of competition and antitrust laws. These efforts look like a move motivated by a desire to prevent the free exchange of political views on Twitter. Carr concluded, I agree 100%. Carr has previously expressed optimism about the Musk acquisition of Twitter. I'm hopeful that Elon Musk is going to bend Twitter's content moderation towards a greater embrace of free speech, Carr said on Fox Business earlier this week. Tesla, the Department of Justice, and the FTC did not immediately respond to comments. Now, he's right. They're going to throw the kitchen sink, and that's what we're seeing. The kitchen sink. From Fox Business, Elon Musk deal saved Twitter, FCC commissioner. Okay. FCC Commissioner Carr, hopeful Musk will bend content moderation towards greater embrace of free speech. I agree. We hope. It certainly can't be worse than it already is. It certainly can't be worse than Facebook or Google already are. I had a conversation recently with some people at Google. I know people at Google. We have contacts at Google. We work with them because, we've grown to be quite a big company. And I said, listen, it is one of the most shockingly insane things for anybody to start a business on YouTube right now, or Facebook, or Twitter, or whatever. I mean, Twitter's probably safer. But I don't know what what constitutes a rule with YouTube. Let me break it down for you, my friends. If I break the law, a police officer sees me break the law, and then I argue I didn't, in fact, break the law. So let's say there's a circumstance in which a thing occurs, and a police officer says, you broke the law, you're under arrest. And I say, I did not. I get processed in the court or in the jail or whatever. I go before a judge in a trial. The judge will interpret the law and say, what happened? The cop will say he was being disorderly. And I'll say, Your Honor, I was protesting on the sidewalk, as is my First Amendment right. The officer clearly thinks I did something illegal. Okay. The judge will then interpret that and say, you're allowed your First Amendment. If he doesn't, you can sue. Now let's take a look at YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, or whatever. I will say something, and they'll say, you violated our rules. And I'll say, how did I violate your rules? And they'll say, we're not going to explain it to you. We don't care. Bye-bye. So for me on YouTube, you know what I told Google? I said, I have no idea what your rules are. Now you can come out here and say, no hate speech. What does that mean? Well, it means you can't disparage a group of people. What group of people? You can't say these things about masks or vaccines or whatever. And I'm like, what if someone's reporting it? What if I'm trying to comment on the news? Don't know. We've had people advocate for the death penalty. In some instances, advocating for the death penalty is a ban because it's calls for violence. In other instances, it's allowed. The rules are not clearly defined. They are interpreted at random intervals by different people. There are people who have broken the rules a year ago. And all of a sudden they get a strike. And it's like, well, a year ago you said this. What? That's how the game is played in Silicon Valley. I'm not interested. How about this? How about Elon Musk? If/when you take control of Twitter, and you probably will, what we do is we have transparency in the rules, we have an appeals process, and we have a transparent appeals process. The process should be, here's the rule, here's why you think here's why we think you broke it, and here's your options. Now, here's the issue. With the real world, most infractions are a slap on the wrist, a fine, or really minor. Let's say you're told no disorderly conduct. Like let's talk about speech. Let's say you go into check this out. Let's say you go into a store and you start yelling. Ah! The store says, "Hey, get out! You can't do that." And you go, "No!" And so you keep yelling. The police will come and they will not throw you out for yelling. They'll say, "You are now trespassing. You must leave. You're not going to go to jail. You're not going to get a ticket. They're not going to cuff you unless you resist." So the police will say, sir, you are trespassing and you must leave. If you refuse to leave, you will be arrested. You then have the option. So here's what happens. On social media, you'll tweet something like, okay, dude, like Zuby did. What should happen? Twitter comes to you and says, this tweet is in violation of whatever. And they do this. They do. They say, delete it and you can continue. Sure. The problem is okay, dude, really in violation? And the problem is Twitter's rules are outright saying certain speech, whether it's literal or otherwise, constitutes a break in the rules. There is no circumstance in which you would, well, with a private business that is small, you can be thrown out for any reason. But when it comes to large, massive spaces, we have what's called publicly owned private spaces. So I'll give you the example of court precedent in New York I've given before. If you go to Zuccotti Park in New York, this is what happened with Occupy, and you say, okay, dude, not a single person will kick you out. Not a single person. If you walked up to someone and said, I'm going to misgender you, not a single person would kick you out. If you start yelling and protesting, still not a single person would kick you out. The point I'm bringing up is Twitter's scale, and which is why I'm like, if we're at the point where it's the public square, it must be treated as such. Meaning, you can say whatever you want. You're not screaming. Perhaps if you spam and you keep spamming someone, then they say, hey, stop doing this. Or it's quite simple. Do you know what the police would do if you went into a privately owned public space or a large park in the public and started talking to someone and you wouldn't leave them alone? The cops would come up and they put their hand up and say, back off. They wouldn't arrest you for the most part. They'd separate you two, you and the other person. So why does not Twitter just do that? Oh, they do. It's called block. You see, this is what's happening. The left wants you to basically be arrested or kicked out because you've said words. There is no screaming. If you went into a Wendy's and you said, okay, dude, 99.99999% of the time, they're not going to throw you out for that. If you went into a Wendy's and walked up to a random customer who was non-binary or whatever, and they were saying something to you, and your voices were low, and you went, okay, dude, and the person complained, they're not going to throw you out. They're going to say, you know, look, we can't do anything. They didn't do anything. I don't know what you want us to do about it. Twitter, on the other hand, is going to be like, you said what? Okay, dude, get out. That's the problem. Now, the issue is a single Wendy's fine. You can leave. You can go eat somewhere else. Twitter is what we refer to as platform monopolistic. It's a platform monopoly. Robert Reich now seems to understand that. I want to give a shout out in the end of this segment to our good friend, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, who tweeted, are right-wingers really unaware of the irony of saying they are champions of free speech and then celebrating a law called Don't Say Gay? The law they cheered on the most is literally the most against free speech. Irony wept, for there were no more worlds left to conquer. I wish Cenk would read the news. He has no idea what he's talking about. It's probably why his followers he's stagnant. It's probably why his show is losing views, and he's become quite unhinged. There is no bill called Don't Say Gay. That's not true. No one's cheering that on. There are some people who think it's true, probably are cheering it on, but in the main public space of debate, there is a law called the Parental Rights and Education Bill. In it, it is not against free speech. It is prohibiting curriculum. The government has the authority to restrict its own speech. If the government is running public schools, the government can tell its own people that the government cannot be teaching certain things. So, they're not allowed to teach Christian praxis. That's right. Imagine if they had math problems and it said, Jesus rose on the third day. A day is 24 hours. How many hours did it take for Jesus to rise? People would be like, wait, what? Why is that in a math book? The same as with critical race praxis. Are right-wingers really unaware? Cenk, look, I understand there's a difference between establishment shills, Democrat moderates, progressives. I think the issue is when I say the left, I typically refer to those who believe fake news. Like, Cenk, you're a shill for the establishment, but also kind of progressive. You do criticize the left, and that's fair, but there is no bill called Don't Say Gay. You believe fake things put out into the world by fake news. And that's the problem. When the left, which is an umbrella term for those who, in my opinion, are overtly authoritarian, tend to be, and believe fake news. Jimmy Dore is on the left economically, but that's why they call him right-wing, because he believes real news. My response. I said, Cenk, That's not the bill's name. And 2, the government can restrict its own speech. It's fascinating because Cenk Uygur's response was a non sequitur. He said, well, why won't you call out Ron DeSantis? You know, he quote tweeted me. Let me scroll down. See. He said, Florida also has a bill that says the state will take away your government contract if you disagree with them on Israel. You are not allowed to have the opinion that Israel should be boycotted, very clearly against freedom of speech. Did you ever call them out on it? Yeah, like every time I talk about Ron DeSantis, I say, you know, I really like what the guy's doing. He's not perfect. He has that weird anti-BDS thing, and I have concerns about his stance on free speech. But overwhelmingly, I think he's doing a good job. I say it every single time. On Timcast IRL, we had Luke Rudkowski on the show who brought that up several times. Yes, because we point these things out. But here we go. Cenk Uygur says, you guys love to say that's not the name when it describes the bill perfectly. Just say it. You don't believe in free speech when you disagree. Now Ben Shapiro is saying everybody who isn't conservative should be fired from Twitter. That's against free speech and it's cancel culture. First of all, I'm not Ben Shapiro. Second of all, I do not share all of my political opinions with Ben Shapiro. So if that's his true sentiment, then I will outright be like, okay, it's wrong. Whatever. It's probably joking, by the way. It doesn't fit the bill perfectly. Cenk, you didn't read the bill. It's don't say straight. Oh, because you can't talk about traditional marriage either. Right, please, just read the thing. You didn't. And that's the difference between the people who follow me and the people who follow you. The people who follow me know that. The people who follow you don't know that. Because you don't know that. And you tell them things that are not true. This is the fundamental difference between left and right, I suppose, because for some reason, even if I have left-wing positions on economic policy, like universal basic health care, canceling student loan debt, which I'm for, not in the way Biden's doing it, I think they should eliminate all interest. So if you've paid your principal already, you're good to go. I don't like the idea that someone took out $40,000 in loans and due to massive interest rates now owe $100,000 and have already paid $40,000, which are many stories we hear. So eliminate that interest. Let people pay back what they borrowed. I agree with that. But it doesn't matter. Cenk Uygur believes fake nonsense, and there's no point in arguing with someone who believes things that aren't true. The bill, 99% of it, is about parental rights and access to information. And there's one provision about school curriculum which impacts traditional marriage and LGBTQ issues together. But he didn't know that, nor does he care. Ron DeSantis championed this bill that said something, you know, they said BDS was anti-Semitic and that they could take away your contracts. Let's break that down for a second. You have no right to a contract with the government. The government does not. When you're doing business and you're like, government, I'm going to provide you with widgets in exchange for $10. The government can say, we don't like the things you do. We're not going to sell you widgets. That they can do that. The government is not obligated to give you money. However, I don't believe the government should be suspending contracts over BDS. If a private company can provide a service to the government, and they do, they also have the right to choose who they do business with. There's a big difference between what's happening right now with Florida's Disney bill and the BDS stuff. In Florida, Disney engaged in politics and said, we want to influence what's happening politically. And so they said, we're not going to give you special access, special provisions, and special privileges if you want to be a political actor. I agree with that. In much the same way, 501c3 nonprofits and churches get tax exempt status so long as they don't engage in politics. You want to give Disney a tax exemption or a tax benefit? They should not be engaging in politics, much like 501c3s. If a business says, I don't want to do business with Israel, the government should not be interfering with that. I can say it a million times, but Cenk Uygur is duplicitous. He doesn't actually read the news. He doesn't actually follow any of the work I do or have any real arguments against what I'm talking about. This is the issue. The left's position is based on absurdities and fake news. And I mean the left, I mean the entirety of it. Progressives believe insane things like Cenk Uygur does. Not all of them, but many. The establishment is outright lying. And so what do you have? You have post-liberals, libertarians, moderates, conservatives who are seemingly aligned. Why? Because we know what's real. We can disagree on our opinions on where these things go, but we agree that it's real. Cenk, you live in a fake news world. You make videos about me that are completely fabricated, based on fabricated, out of context clips. I offer for you to have a conversation. You won't do it. You make things up on Twitter. What happened to you, dude? You used to be this anti-establishment guy. Now you're going on these weird rants and screaming about things that aren't true. Read the news. Now, I'll tell you what I think. I think Cenk Uygur retired. I think he retired, gets his news and information from Twitter, doesn't fact check it, and is taking the lazy approach. Whatever. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.